You don't know flag.
Thank you, Sergeant Central. Thank you, Sergeant.
You don't know flag.
Welcome to You Don't Know Flag, a podcast full of stories about retro gaming, retro computing, video games, arcade games, and technology from a guy who was there and still is. My name is Rob O'Hara, but for the next 30 minutes, you can call me Flag. Greetings and salutations, listeners, and welcome to episode number 247 of You Don't Know Flack. I am your host, Rob Flack O'Hara, and on today's episode, we will be covering the second half of the 50 Nifty United States. I mentioned on the previous episode, if you didn't listen to that one already, that I have been to all 50 states in the United States of America, and so I am running through that list of all 50 states and sharing one memory I have from each state. So I hope when I get to your state that I share a memory that you enjoy. And although I've been to all 50 states, again, the rules that I had was that I touched foot on the state. So if I flew over the state, I never counted it. If I drove through and didn't stop, I didn't count it. But some of them were a bit of a stretch because when I went back to look through my memories throughout the years, on some, I think I just stopped for a meal or stopped to get gas or something like that. And I didn't really explore the states. So there are a few states on the previous episode you already heard that I would like to go back and do more in. And so those are on my, I don't want to say bucket list. I'm too young for a bucket list, but let's say my immediate Tupperware cup list, whatever that is, that I would like to revisit some of those states. So we're going to jump right in here. I will just say that You Don't Know Flag is made possible by Patreon supporters like Paul Ramos, Stephen Burt, and John Trehold, especially right now. I just got that Patreon payment a couple of days ago. It takes a few days to come in, and let me tell you, it came in right after I'd been on furlough for 5 days. So Patreon came through with a good payment this time. So I appreciate everyone who supports all my podcasts, my creative endeavors, my YouTube videos. If you would like to support those things, you can go to my Patreon page. That's patreon.com/Rob O'Hara. All my patrons get behind the scenes blog posts, access to the Amigos Retro Gaming Discord server, and other additional perks. So to find out more, visit my page. Again, that is patreon.com/Rob O'Hara. Again, this is part 2 of a podcast where I will be going through all 50 states. This is, I guess, the second half. I think I cut it right off somewhere in the middle, but I don't remember where it was, so I guess I'll just start over. Alabama. No, I'm just kidding. I have a page break or a line break right here, right between Maine and Maryland. So that's where we will be starting this episode of You Don't Know Flat. As we go through that second half of the list of the states, we'll be starting off with Maryland. So I have a memory of Maryland that's not really about Maryland. I mean, it is about Maryland to me. It's about a trip I took to Maryland, but it's definitely not one that anyone else will relate to. For several years, for about 5 years, I worked in a department that performed government security, mostly network security. But one of my duties for a couple of years was to travel to other government agencies and perform security scans. So you can imagine that if you're in the world of security, you already know your own trash. You already know your own problems, right? But if you bring in somebody from the outside, they can look at things with a fresh set of eyes. So there's a government program where I and one government agency would go to a different agency and perform scans over there, and they would go to another agency, and so on and so forth. So everybody's helping everyone else out. And one of the government scans that I did was in Maryland. Now, most of the time, although this sounds very clandestine and spy-like, but it was pretty matter-of-factly, everybody agreed on what was going to happen. I was going to come in, bring my laptop, perform some scans, give them a report, and then leave. You know, it wasn't like I was, breaking in through a skylight in the middle of the night, although there were a couple times where I was asked to test physical security, check doors, and see if I could tailgate which if you're not familiar with the term, tailgate is when someone uses their key card to go through an open door, and then you go through the door behind them before it closes. So that's tailgating. So to try those different things to make sure that their employees were aware of security practices. So anyway, it wasn't as secretive as it sounds. It really wasn't like a spy novel, but there were a couple times that were, and this was one time that was. So I was asked to go to a government agency in and around that area. I've signed so many NDAs about this scam, but when I went there, I was not given the address of the building where I would be performing the scans. I was picked up from my hotel and then driven to a location, and then that's where I performed scans. So I did not have access to a car, vehicle, anything like that. This was definitely one of those situations where you checked your cell phone in at the beginning. I did not carry a cell phone with me. And unlike most scans, there was someone with me most of the time. So it was very unique. And then I did this for a week, but after the end of the day, I think 3 days probably, but after the end of each day, I was driven back to my hotel. Someone asked me one time if I was blindfolded, and I said no, but I probably couldn't find the building again anyway. So, and of course it's been a long time, but so that's, I've done other things in Maryland, but that's really a strong memory I have of going to Maryland is this very, very professional and very serious people picking me up and driving me around to do security scans. And I always wanted to tell people, like, break the ice and say, I'm a goofball. Like, I'm not who you think I am. But in those types of situations, you kind of have to hold character. So anyway, there's a memory of Maryland. That brings us to Massachusetts. Now, I have several memories. I've been to Massachusetts many times for work. I went to a computer specialist training there in the late 90s. This was kind of a funny thing because I would consider myself at that point an advanced, not just computer user, but like I had built my own PC. I had done all these things. I'd been doing it for years and years, right? Like I had a PC in the 80s, like an IBM PC, So they were hiring new computer specialists, and they sent them to this class. But I was doing technical support for those people, and I made an argument that how can I support them when they've been through this class if I haven't seen the class? So I got to go through the class, which was be careful what you wish for, because I sat for an entire week and was taught, the proper way to insert a floppy disk. And there was a troubleshooting session where you had to troubleshoot a PC, and something was wrong with each PC. And what was wrong with mine was the network cable had been stuck underneath the computer instead of plugged in to the jack on the back. So, but it was a fun trip. I got to go to the Bull and Finch pub, which if you don't know, that is the pub that the outside was what was used for Cheers, the bar. Of course, the inside doesn't look anything like Cheers, but the outside, Cheers was a big 80s show that I grew up watching. So that was really fun. But here's my Michigan. I went all around it. My Massachusetts story. I flew to Boston for a class or a work engagement or something, but this was in the mid to late 90s. I can tell you that it was a time when the Chicago Bulls were somewhere in their three-peat. So this is probably 97, maybe 98. And I had gone to Boston for a computer class, and on the way there, I had the worst flight turbulence that I've ever had in my life. People all around me were getting sick. There was not an unused barf bag on the flight. It wasn't a flight that was just making people sick. It was a flight that people were scared for their safety. I mean, being thrown around and bumpy. It was by far the worst flight I've ever been on in my life. And, obviously I lived. I don't know if this is not AI, it's really me. But I did make it to Boston. I was there for a week, and every night of that week I had a nightmare about being on a plane and having it crash. I mean, every single night. I woke up every night in sweat and almost like night terrors. It was very, very vivid and scary dreams, just terrible nightmares the whole week. But I knew I was in Boston. I had to get home to Oklahoma. I was going to have to face this and get back on a plane. And so I went I was getting ready to go to the airport, and I got a call in my hotel room that said my flight had been delayed due to maintenance reasons. And I was like, I'm not getting on that plane. I'm not doing it. And so I called the person that handled travel at the time for me, and I said, I'm not getting on that plane. I can't do it, so I don't know what else to do. And so this was not normally something they would approve, but they approved a rental car for me for 24 hours. So I'm in Boston, and it takes like several days to drive from there to Oklahoma City. But I looked at the map, and I saw that I could get to Chicago. So if you get on, I think it's I-80, like I avoided toll roads. And again, this is pre-GPS. This is, this was a challenge. I got a rental car in Boston, and I drove to Chicago. I had a 24-hour rental car, and I looked up on Google Maps just a minute ago. And if you take I-80, it says if you drive straight through, it's a little over 17 hours. So I made it, I don't remember what I made it in. I think probably 19 hours, something like that. And then my wife and my buddy Jeff and his wife, the three of them drove from Oklahoma City up to Chicago to meet me. So I drove from Boston to Chicago in about 18 or 19 hours. And then they met me up there. And I was so tired. I remember literally hallucinating, like seeing someone in the road, standing on the road, and then they weren't there. And I just remember I was like, I got to get off the road. Not a safe thing to do, but I did make it. And when they all arrived, I remember I got there right around the time that the Bulls game was starting. And so everybody was excited to watch the Bulls game. And I sat there kind of comatose and watched one of the Bulls final games in Chicago. Of course on television, but yeah, so I'll always associate that story with going to Boston and going to Massachusetts. Michigan is one of those states that I need to revisit. I have been to Michigan on multiple road trips. I had a stop in Michigan when I rode a train one time, and I had a stop in Michigan. I could barely count that, right? Like I went to a snack bar in Michigan. Of course, I drove through Michigan when I went from Boston to Chicago, and I've driven through Michigan on trips like when I drove from Oklahoma to Minnesota. But I'm looking through my notes, and I just can't remember a single thing, like one thing that sticks out, like something that I saw in Michigan. I will tell you, a confession is that I grew up afraid of Detroit. Detroit was in the 80s, was always portrayed as this dark, dingy, when I think of Detroit, I think of the crime in RoboCop. Like that was Detroit to me. And I've since learned that, it's not quite like that. So going to Detroit is definitely on, again, that short list of places. The next time I go up north, I'm going to go out of my way to go to Detroit and see some things. So I have been to Michigan, but I haven't really given it, I haven't spent as much time as it deserves there. But go a little bit further and you'll hit Minnesota. And I have been to Minnesota several times. I've been to one of my early work trips. I spent 2 weeks in Minnesota, in fact, and I stayed at a hotel that was right across from the Mall of America. So I spent 2 weeks basically hanging out in the Mall of America, which is they used to say it's the largest mall in North America, but there's one larger now, or there's one larger in Edmonton, Canada. So it's the largest indoor mall in the United States. It's a mall inside, in the center of the mall, there's a Ferris wheel and roller coasters. There was a log ride when I first went. The log ride's gone. But I remember when I was there, I was looking for a battery for a camcorder. And I went in and I asked someone if there was a Radio Shack. And he said, there's one on the first floor on the west side, and there's one on the east side on the third floor. So that mall is gigantic. I've been there multiple times. In fact, gosh, I wish I could remember. I hope this person is still listening and will send me a note, because I can't remember their name off the top of my head. But there's a Jelly Belly store. There was a Jelly Belly store. I think it's been usurped by the M&M store. But there was a Jelly Belly store in no, it was Peeps. It's a Peeps store that was there in the Mall of America. And I bought a coffee mug from the Peeps store, and I got it all the way to Oklahoma. And when I opened my trunk, it fell out and broke right in my driveway. And I posted on Twitter about it. And I was like, boy, I made it 800 miles or something. And then it broke in my, or 1,000 miles, and then broke in my driveway. And someone saw that tweet, and they either worked for Peep or had a connection to Peep, and they mailed me a new mug. A Peep mug, and I still have it. I still drink coffee out of it to this day. So if I could share one story with you, my wife has been trying to launch a shoe company. And again, I never use this platform to be political, but I will tell you, if anyone tells you that tariffs aren't directly affecting people, the only places that she was able to get a deal where someone could make shoes for her at the price and the volume that she needed was through China. And so she ordered the first batch of shoes, and between after they were shipped but before they arrived is when the tariffs kicked in. And so we had to pay, they held them at the border. We had to pay another 50%. And the prices were so high, we've paid so much that she can't even sell the shoes to break even. And so she had an alternative deal to have shoes made in Brazil. And now we have a huge 100% tariff right now with Brazil. So her shoe company is kind of dead in the water. But we were exploring places to have her shoes made in the United States. And so she had looked around different places in the United States and places that make boots, or not boots, but shoes in general. And the place that she found was Red Wing Shoes, which are located up in Minnesota. And so and I mentioned boot because in the lobby of the Red Wing store in Minnesota, they have the world's largest boot. And it's an actual boot, like it has real shoelaces. It's not like a statue or a carving. It is a real boot. It has a real sole. It's made out of leather, and it is 20 feet tall. We took a lot of pictures around that, and she actually met with people from Red Wing, but they don't outsource to companies that have such as small orders as what my wife would need. So it didn't work out. But while we were there, we planned some different things. And one of the things that we saw when we were in Minnesota was Paisley Park, also known as the former home of the one and only Prince. I would consider myself an average Prince fan. So what that means is if you're my age and you grew up in the 80s, everybody was a Prince fan. Everybody loved Purple Rain. Everybody loved When Doves Cry and Let's Go Crazy and all those songs. They were on the radio all the time. There was a lot of times where you would, in a half hour, you might hear one or maybe two Prince songs. Prince was everywhere. So everybody grew up listening to Prince. So I didn't have any Prince posters. I didn't wear purple. I wasn't a fan like that. But I mean, of course, I would, I'm a fan of Prince like I was of Michael Jackson and Cyndi Lauper and, just Madonna, all those 80s icons that you just couldn't get away from. So going to Paisley Park, you do a guided tour. A tour guide takes you through, and it's part memorabilia, and that stuff is very interesting, of course, right? Like there's the motorcycle that he rode in Purple Rain and different things like that. There's the keyboard that he wrote most of the songs on Purple Rain, and they have it set up where it plays demos, and it's the exact sound, the drum sound from When Doves Cry, like don't like that. It's gives me chills. But what was more interesting was to see how his life worked, and you just get a little glimpse of that inside Paisley Park. But he had recording studios, and he had people on hand where he could wake up in the middle of the night and go down, and he had an entire recording studio always set up and ready to go. He could wake up at 3 a.m, roll out of bed, walk downstairs, pick up a guitar, and record something. So that's why, there's a thing at Paisley Park called the Vault, where there are, I think they said hundreds, like 300, 500 albums that he recorded that have never been released and will probably never be released. So, but it was interesting to see that. He had a large TV room where they said one time he went to there's a women's Minnesota WNBA team, and he went to the game, and then afterwards he invited the whole team back to Paisley Park, and they all came there, and he could do that sort of things, and you could see how it trapped him. That amount of fame trapped him. He could not go. Like, he couldn't go like me. He couldn't go to the mall. He couldn't go to the Mall of America. He couldn't get out of his house, without just being swarmed. So instead, he built a place where people could come to him. And so that's what it was. It's a compound. It's a huge area that he, for long periods of time, didn't leave. He just stayed there, And unfortunately, he died there. And in fact, there's an area where he died. I think releasing that footage of him collapsing and dying in his own elevator, I think that's kind of distasteful. But you could see in the house where the elevator was, and the elevator has been blocked off. It's not an elevator anymore. So because I was looking for that, as morbid as it sounds, I wanted to see where the elevator was. But yeah, Paisley Park is a place. I don't know that I'd ever go there again. Like, I went there one time. I got to see all of Prince's shoes. He had over 300 pairs of shoes. I believe they're all men's size 5. And I believe they all have 4-inch heels. And I think that's what it was. But yeah, so I don't need to go again, but it was an amazing thing to see. And it's something that I will always associate with Minnesota. Mississippi. Memphis, Tennessee. No, Mississippi. I always run those together, even though I know the difference. But Mississippi, I've been to many times, and if there's one trip to Mississippi that I will always remember, it is from 2005 when I went to Tunica. So Tunica is like a little gambling loop. So it's this, Tunica is a city, and then off the city, there's a loop that I don't know how long it is, 5 miles, but it's a road that's like 5 miles. And on the other side, like outside of Tunica, there's just a whole collection of Vegas style casinos, really large, fancy casinos. There's a Fitzgerald's. All the big names are out there, and it feels like it's in the middle of nowhere. And then you get out there, and so I had graduated high school. I worked on an associate's degree for a couple of years. I didn't finish that. I didn't go back. I often tell people I'm the proud owner of a 10-year, 2-year degree. It took me a decade to finish my 2-year degree. And then a few years after that, I went back to finish my bachelor's. And so I got my bachelor's in 2005, and I called my buddy Andy, and I said, I got to tell you something. I just graduated. I got my 4-year degree. And he said, I got to tell you something. I just got divorced. So I knew it was coming, but I didn't know it had just happened. And so we were looking for a way to celebrate, and we'd heard about Tunica. And so my wife had at that time, a 2-year-old Honda Odyssey minivan. And so Andy and I piled in the minivan, and we drove to Tunica. I will tell you that I think we were there for 2 days, 2.5 days, and I drank more alcohol in those 2.5 days than I did probably the rest of 2005. It was a very inebriating trip. And I'll share you one story from that trip. There are many stories that I cannot share, but here's the story that I will share with you. Andy and I went to the casinos. Sometimes they have free drinks, but you have to tip the people that bring you the drinks. But if you go to the bar, the drinks are free, and then you just tip every now and then. You tip the bartender. And so my buddy Andy and I had gone up to sit at a bar that had video poker built into the bar. And video poker, if you play it right, and I was thinking I was playing blackjack, and so I could play blackjack. It seems like forever. Like, you win a little, you lose over a few times, you win, and then you lose, and so, I could just play it for long periods of time. And so Andy and I went up to this bar, and there was a bartender. I don't remember his name. Let's just say his name is Bill. And so Bill was like, hey, what are you guys drinking? And we're drinking. And then at one point, I said, hey, the drinks are free. So we're drinking, like I'm drinking rum and Cokes nonstop. Like I'm not having one an hour. I'm having like one every few minutes. And at one point I said, hey, what's it cost to get a double? Bill says, drinks are free. You can get a double. So I was like, well, make them a double, Bill. So now we're drinking like doubles of rum and Cokes. And Andy and I are getting really, really smashed. And we're at the point where like we're being loud, I think, but it's a casino and it's a bar, so lots of people are being loud. I don't know that we were being obnoxious, but definitely people noticed us. One thing I remember is a wedding party came in, and I told them, I was like, hey, everybody drinks on me. And they all cheered, and they were patting me on the back and doing all the, like cheering me and stuff like that. And then, of course, I don't know if they realize that drinks are free. So, of course, drinks are on me. Who cares? Eventually Bill left. He went home and he was gone for a long time. Someone else came and was bartending, and we kept playing blackjack and drinking. And I remember one point, well, and this is towards the end, but eventually Bill came back, and we were like, oh, Bill, where you been? And he said, it's my next shift. He said, I went home. And so we had shown up towards the end of Bill's shift, and we had stayed at that bar for 8 hours. He had gone home at night, slept for the night, and he had the morning shift the next day and had come back to work. And he said, what have you got? I said, we've been here the whole time. And he goes, oh, you boys need to take a break. And we were like, I think you're probably right. And around that time, Andy fell off the back of a bar stool and landed flat on his back in the casino floor. And the guy said, yeah, he goes, you guys need a break. And so he gave us 2 complimentary tickets to the buffet. And I think we're at Harrah's. And he said, here's two tickets, free complimentary tickets to breakfast. You guys go have some breakfast, go chill out a little bit. And I have spent in my life thousands of dollars at casinos. Not at one day or one given time. But if you added it all together, I'm sure I've spent, $5,000-$10,000, oh yeah, for sure. And I've never gotten anything, very, 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 very few complimentary things, not including the cruise, because we had a drink package there. But, so I always remember that we got complimentary breakfast basically for just being drunks. So yeah, if you're in the area of, Mississippi, go check out Tunica. It's a fine place to vacation. Next on my list is Missouri. Now, one of the things I would say about Missouri is I spent my childhood always driving through Missouri, and because we would go to Chicago. But we never stopped. We would drive through Missouri, and we would see the arch, and then that's where you turn. That's where you turn off of whatever it is, like 44 to 55, and that takes you all the way up to Joliet. So I saw the arch many times, but we never stopped. And one of the things I remember seeing all the time was signs for Merrimack Caverns, and you see them for like 100 miles. You would see these signs that would say, Jesse James Hideout, Merrimack Caverns, 86 exits away. And then the next exit, you'd see a sign that would say, come see the splendid caves inside Merrimack Caverns, 85 exits away. You just see them forever. And it was such a buildup. And then there's always a sign that says Merrimack Caverns, you just missed it. It's one exit back. And so we never went there as a kid. My dad does not like, he's very claustrophobic, and he doesn't like caves or anything like that. So he would never go in a cave. And so we never went there. So when my kids were, they were young. This is like 2010, 2011. We went to Chicago for St. Patrick's Day, and we built in one whole day just to go to St. Louis. And so, that whole trip. So the first thing was we went to Merrimack Caverns, and this is kind of funny because we were the last people to go through the day. We were the very last group. And so our tour guide was taking us through the caverns. And they're kind of designed, I mean, it's not designed, but they're laid out in rooms. So you're in a room and then there's a pathway and then you go to another opening. So that would be another room. And so when we would move from one room to the other, he would turn off the lights of the back room. And I remember looking back and it was pitch dark. It turns out caves are really dark. And I remember thinking, like, if this guy has a heart attack, like, we're done for. I can't get out of here. I guess we'd have to follow the rope guideline to get back to stuff. But I mean, it was pitch black. Every room, when he would turn off the lights, it was pitch black. So my kid got a plastic miner's helmet there with a spotlight on the front, and he wore it the entire vacation. So I have tons of pictures of him standing in front of the Green River in downtown Chicago, wearing this toy miner's hat. And, you know, the other thing I'll mention real quick is in Springfield, Missouri, is the 1984 arcade. The 1984 arcade was the first retro, like full-on retro arcade I had ever heard of. That was like before there were all these barcades, before retro arcades had come back. And I drove up there multiple times to go. I think it was $10 to pay. You know, you pay $10 and then all the games are free. But 1984 arcade for me kind of kicked off this whole resurgence of retro arcades. So that's definitely something else I associate with Missouri. Montana. Now Montana, I drove through many times. You know that I lived in Spokane, Washington. I drove from Spokane to Oklahoma many times, back and forth many times. So that route looks like, if you're going from Oklahoma, you drive north to Kansas, you drive over to Denver, Colorado, and then you drive north, I think to maybe Bozeman, Montana, somewhere up there, Missoula, Montana, maybe, and then you drive west over to Spokane. So that's the route we used to take. So I went through Montana quite a bit. I do remember one time we stopped one time there, and I did not partake, but there was a big sign that said, come today for the Testicle Festival, which was a festival where they were serving, like, what do they call it? Rocky Mountain oysters. Which is not for me. When it comes to things like that, I always think we haven't run out of Big Macs. There are too many things on this earth for me to eat before I get to eating testicles. But I did get a bumper sticker from there that said, I went to the Testicle Festival and I had a ball. Maybe it said I had a ball at the Testicle Festival, but I had a PC, one of those full-size towers at the time, and I was covering it with stickers, and so it was on my PC for a long time. I used to look at it all the time. So now here's a memory about Montana, and it involves me, my wife, a man named Les, and the Boo Bear. So when I was working in Spokane, which is not in Montana, Spokane, Washington, we had a thing called the Boo Bear. So imagine, I don't know if it was really one of those, gosh, I can't even think of the name of it now, but like the little collectible bears, you know. I don't know if it was a name brand thing or if it was a knockoff. It doesn't matter, but it's almost like a Beanie Baby, really, you know. But it was this little bear, and we called it the Boo Bear. So if you made a boo-boo in the office, you would get the Boo Bear. So if you loaded the paper wrong in the copier, someone would bring the Boo Bear and put it on your desk. And then you had to wait for someone else to mess something up. And then when they did, you could give them the Boo Bear, right? So it was just this fun little inter-office thing that they had done, and we my wife and I were born into or brought into, right? So anyway, Les was an inspector, a aviation inspector that we worked with, and he had a motorcycle. He bought a motorcycle, and he told us multiple times that he was not particularly good at riding a motorcycle. I mean, I think he had ridden a motorcycle in his life, and this is an older man. He's in his 50s or something. I mean, it was older to me then because I was in my 20s, so he seemed like an old guy to me. But I remember it was like a big Honda Goldwing. I remember it had reverse. I'd never ridden a motorcycle that has a reverse gear. And he told us that he had it in his garage and put it in reverse and drove it right through the drywall into the house. I go, well, that's not good. So I had this impression that maybe he didn't have a lot of experience with a motorcycle. So anyway, he was on his way to Montana for some sort of meeting, and he had a motorcycle wreck. And apparently what happened was he fell asleep while he was riding, which I never had a motorcycle that was that comfortable that I could fall asleep on, but I could see on one of those big dresser motorcycles, but he fell asleep and drove off the road and slid off in gravel and had a really, really bad accident. In fact, it punctured one of his lungs. And so they took him to the hospital, and he was there. And so Susan and I mean, we were living in Spokane. We had no friends. We didn't know anybody. And so over a weekend, we said, hey, you want to drive to Montana and go see Les, and we'll take him to Boo Bear. That'll be a funny thing to do. So that's what we did. We got in Susan's car, we got the Boo Bear, and we drove 6 hours, I think it was, over to wherever it was. Like I said, Bozeman, or I think it was Missoula is actually where he was. So we drove over there. And we went bebopping into the hospital. We're like, hey, we're here to see Les. And they go, oh, are you family? And we're like, no, we're coworkers, And they're like, well, he's not really having, not having visitors. And we're like, oh, well, we heard that, he'd been in a wreck. And they're like, yeah, it's not going good. And somehow we found out, I don't know if she told us or someone told us, but they had been trying to get air in his lungs, and they exploded his other lung. So now he has no lungs, which I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure that's bad. And so we said, oh my gosh, I said, that's terrible. I said, here's, and I explained the situation. I said, so here's what we'd like to do is we'd like to leave this Boo Bear here. And when he wakes up, he'll know we came from the office, and he'll know that we were thinking of him. And she says, okay. And so anyway, Les died, which is not particularly funny. But yeah, he died. He did not make it out of the hospital. And then, of course, one day someone in the office was like, hey, what happened to the Boo Bear? And then they were like, I think Rob and Susan took it somewhere. And then we're like, yeah, we took it to Les in the hospital. And they're like, you took it to a guy that died? And I go, yeah, well, we didn't know he was going to die at the time. We thought it'd be funny. It's one of those stories that could have gone a different way, but it didn't. So, anyway, rest in peace, Les. And wherever you are, I hope you took the Boo Bear with you or got a kick out of it whenever you saw that. There's a memory about Montana. Nebraska. Now Nebraska's not that far from me, but I haven't gone to Nebraska. But I haven't intentionally gone to Nebraska to go do something, So Nebraska's one that is on my list of places to go because it's really not that far, and because it's not that far, it's kind of always been a drive-through state for me. So when we go places, I've driven through Nebraska. I was looking at pictures from a vacation before I did this podcast, and I have pictures of us at this a diner kind of restaurant in Nebraska, and it's hard to count that. So we've been to Nebraska, but again, it's one that we haven't really given it its proper due. So Nebraska, you're on my list to come back and revisit. Now, Nevada, which is the home of Las Vegas, I could tell you a million stories about Nevada, right? For work, I found myself in a situation where I got moved into I was a domain administrator for a network of about 10,000 people, and I got moved into a position where I was the enterprise admin, or one of 6 enterprise admins, for a network of 60,000 people. And when I took that position, I didn't take that position. I was moved into that position. And once I got there, my credentials and my experience were questioned because I didn't have a piece of paper that said, I know how to do networks, right? And so literally, everybody that was on that team was knowledgeable, and everybody on the team knew that everybody else on the team was knowledgeable. But there were some questions from management saying, well, this guy doesn't have a piece of paper, and this guy, maybe he doesn't, So long story short, we were signed up for a Microsoft, an MCSE. So that is a engineer level, so certification. So to get an MCSE, you have to pass 6 Microsoft certifications. Now, I had done Microsoft certifications earlier in my career as a way to move up, right? So I got my MCSA, I don't know what, but like I got certification for Windows Server and like Windows 2000 Server. Like it was a long time ago, right? But they were really pushing that you had to have an MCSE if you're going to support a network, a government network of this size. So they signed us up. Now again, to take a Microsoft course and a test, sometimes people do this over a semester in college, right? They take a course for an entire semester, and then at the end they take this test and they get their certification. This was passing 6 tests over, I think, 15 days. It is if you don't know anybody that's been to a boot camp, it's absolutely brutal because you go there and it's really not about learning the information. You really already have to know the information. And once you know the information, they're going to tell you what's on the test. They're going to tell you what parts of things. So it's not, a lot of it was not real world applicable. Like it wasn't, you have a network and then cable's bad. What are you going to do? I'm going to change the cable or fix the cable or whatever. It was stuff like, how do you figure, TCP/IP subnets and how do you do all these different things and what's best practice for where you want to, how many domain controllers do you want to have in different locations, like that kind of stuff, right? And the right answer is the Microsoft answer. So that's what they're telling you in that class, not what you would necessarily do in the real world, because the real world has things like budgets, right? Or different factors, but that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for the Microsoft answer. So anyway, myself and 2 other employees got sent to this boot camp. One did not pass. One didn't make it all the way through, but me and the other guy did. And it was literally like classes would be 10 hours long, and then they would say, go home and read all this stuff and do practice tests. So we were in the La Quinta, which is located right near the airport in Vegas. So when you land at the airport, you go down the street, there's a La Quinta, and that's where I was. We only made it to the strip like 2 times in 15 days because it was so intense. It was such an intense thing. So that's a Vegas story where I did not go to Vegas. I mean, I did, but most of my time was spent right off. And I'll tell you, this is funny. When you go to those classes, everybody talks about, you say, where are you from? What, this, that, and you introduce yourself. And so my cohorts and I, we said, well, we're from, the Federal Aviation Administration. And the second day of the class was when that Malaysian flight, 370, when that flight disappeared. And so it was on the news every day, and people were like, hey, what do you think about that flight? And I was like, man, I know enough not to say anything, because that is one thing about when you work for an agency like that. If you say something, you have to be sure to say, like, this is my personal, like, I'm sure you've seen that on social media where people say, this is my personal thoughts and opinions and do not reflect, because I can't say things like if I say, boy, flying sure isn't safe, then somebody's going to go, this guy that works for the FAA says flying isn't safe. You don't want that, right? So people are like, well, what do you think happened to this flight? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm sure it landed safely somewhere. I don't know what happened. So anyway, that class is kind of a fun, gosh, you know what? I'm going to share just a couple. I'm going to linger on Las Vegas, for just a minute. One memory I have is I had a full weekend to weekend, that I drove to Las Vegas. And, the first weekend was CGE. I think this was 2007, maybe 2009, but, it was Classic Gaming Expo. So I drove out there over a weekend and I stayed there. And this is a huge gaming convention, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then the following weekend was DEF CON, which is the country's largest hacking convention. And I wanted to attend both events. In fact, I'd been accepted as a speaker at DEF CON. So I had a speaker badge, and I was talking about writing books, and I was on a stage with guys from the Cult of the Dead Cow, and guys that had formed Radman, who had formed the Acid, the old ANC group. So, I mean, I'm up there with like guys that were my heroes when I was a kid, you know? And so anyway, I was going to fly out there and then fly home in between the two trips, and the Stratosphere had rooms during the week for $29 a night. So it just made sense to stay there. So that's what I did. So I went the weekend before, and then I stayed the whole week. And then the weekend after, I got to meet many of my heroes from the Cult of the Dead Cow and other hacking legends and stuff. That was an unbelievable trip. And CGE was the same way. That's where I first met Walter Day from Twin Galaxies, and all my friends that used to hang out on Digital Press. Some of them even listen to this podcast today. What a fun trip. Just what a fun experience. And in fact, in the middle of that trip is when my dad came out. So my dad had never been to Las Vegas either. And so he flew out, I think on Monday, and flew back on Thursday. So, but in between the two things. And he had just bought a brand new digital camera and left it in a casino. And once we got out, he realized he had left it. We went back, and of course it was gone immediately. And he kept asking me, like, will you call them? Will you do that? And I mean, I did, but yeah, I mean, you leave a brand new digital camera inside a casino, that thing is gone. So, you know what, I'm going to tell you two other quick things. One is that I have gone to see Penn and Teller multiple times in Las Vegas. I've gone to their show a couple of times, and then if you're familiar with their television show, Fool Us, my wife got tickets for us to go see a television taping of Fool Us, which they filmed multiple episodes all in one day. And the coolest thing about that was it was like the season opener. And what I didn't realize is at the beginning of the show, where they pan out and show the crowd and everyone's clapping, there's just one clip of that. They just shoot that one time. And so we were on the very back row, and the very behind us were these panels that were lit with LED lights. And so for all of season 3, if you know where to look, you can see my silhouette at the very top of the back of the Fool Us set. But one other time, gosh, I got to get off that. I said I was only going to share one memory, but here's the last thing I want to share with you is that when my kids were young, one time we took them, we were on our way to California, but we stayed the night in Vegas. And my wife got tickets for the four of us to go see David Copperfield. So we went to go see David Copperfield, who I grew up loving. Now it seems hokey. That big stage magic seems a little silly, but as you know, I grew up watching David Copperfield. And at the beginning of his show, this was when Twitter was like relatively new, and he put up his Twitter account handle, and they made an announcement. They said, if you tweet David Copperfield, something magic might happen on your phone. So I thought it was going to be some sort of magic trick. So I sent David Copperfield a tweet and said, hey, my kids and I are here. We love the show, or something like that. And towards the end of the show, I got a tweet back that says, come down to the door that's under one of the large projection screens. And so my wife and myself and the kids, we went down there, and I thought they were going to give us like a t-shirt or something. And they said, do you want to meet David Copperfield? I said, yeah, sure. And so they opened a door. Who does this happen to, right? This is my life. And so they open a door, and we go in, and the lady that's walking us through is talking into a headset thing like she's with the CIA. I mean, she's just mumbling. She's like, people, you know. And then they open another door, and we're whisked into another room, and then a third room. And we're standing there. We're in like an empty room. There's nothing in there. And I swear, out of nowhere, David Copperfield is suddenly behind us. And he's like, hello. We go, hi. He goes, did you enjoy the show? And I go, yeah, big fan. I said, I go see Penn and Teller. And I said, I saw you in the 80s, and it's so good to see you again. And he goes, oh, thank you very much. And would you like a photo? And so we handed, the lady handed her my wife's phone, and she took one photo, and the phone had been in my wife's pocket or purse. And so it's like there's sweat or something on the lens. So the whole photo is really blurry, and which is funny. It's almost like it's mystical, you know? And then we all looked at the photo. We were like, oh, that's great. And I turned around and David Copperfield was gone. It was like he appeared and he disappeared. There had to have been like some little trick door or something. And I thought, what a fitting way to meet David Copperfield. So I've met Penn and Teller, and I've met David Copperfield. Good times in Las Vegas. New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a state I've only been to one time. It's we went to. No, I've been there twice. Start off my stories with wrong information. I've been there twice, but I've been to the same place both times, and that is Fun Spot, which is at the time claimed to be the country's largest retro arcade. Now, I believe Galloping Ghost has usurped them in size, the one in Chicago, which I've also been to. But we went to Fun Spot. And the first time I went there was with Jason Scott. So Jason Scott, the guy who made the BBS documentary. When I was in Boston, I mentioned that I liked arcade games, and he said, you want to go to Fun Spot? Which I did not know where it was. And so I said, yeah. He picked me up from my hotel and drove me from Boston, Massachusetts to New Hampshire. We went to Fun Spot. We spent an entire day. In fact, here's a memory of that. That was not long after the release of The King of Kong, the documentary, the Donkey Kong documentary with Billy Mitchell and Steve Wiebe, all those guys. And part of that documentary is filmed at Fun Spot. So they played the Donkey Kong machine at Fun Spot. So I told Jason, I said, we must play this machine. And so we played that Donkey Kong machine, and there was a graphics glitch with the board. Something was wrong with the board. And so I think the score was flickering and something else, but the barrels were invisible. The barrels were not showing up. And so we ended up playing it anyway. And I had played a lot of Donkey Kong at that point in time, and I kind of knew the timing. And so I won the competition. The score was 200, and he scored 100. So he was able to jump one invisible barrel, and I was able to jump two. So, but yeah, I went back later to Fun Spot with my kids. Fun Spot has a mascot, a big giant dragon whose name is Top Snuff. And I did not get it at all. It was one of my kids that pointed out that Top Snuff is Fun Spot spelled backwards. So there you go. Sometimes it takes me a minute to get stuff like that. But that's New Hampshire for you. New Jersey, I only went to New Jersey one time. I mean, specifically, like out of my way to New Jersey. And that was to go to the Digital Press store. So Digital Press was a website and a forum. That is the first forum that I found. There were a couple of people. One was Phosphor.Fossils, who runs the logbook.com. And his name is Earl Green. And Earl, I found out he lived in Arkansas, and I was looking online for other people. This was early 2000s, other people that were into retro video games, retro computers, because I didn't know there was a movement at that time. I thought I was a weirdo that just never got rid of stuff, right? And so I found him online, and I saw he was talking about this gaming convention. This was in 2003, called the Oklahoma Video Game Expo, OVGE. And so I met with him. I met with some other people, and that got me going to Digital Press. And so Digital Press they were kind of frenemies with Atari Age. There was always this underlying animosity between the two, which is strange. But so Atari Age was the biggest forum and website for Atari stuff, and Digital Press was the biggest forum for everything else. And they had price guides, they had collector guides, they had all sorts of stuff. But after being open after having this huge community, they eventually opened a physical location. The owner, Joe, opened a physical location. So I drove over. I was up there doing a training class or something. I drove over to New Jersey, and I went to the Digital Press store, and Joe gave me a whole tour. In fact, he allowed me to put copies of my books in the store to sell. And I think he must have paid me he paid me like cover price or something, and then he kept whatever the profits were, which was fine with me. But he gave me a tour of the basement, which was where the big part of the collection was. And the guys from Digital Press are the guys who opened up the video game museum down in Dallas. It's the same guys. So if you've ever been down there, that's the same guys. But yeah, I went to New Jersey specifically just to go to the Digital Press store. So that's what I would associate with that. New Mexico, man. I've been to New Mexico many times. The very first road trip that Susan and I ever took together before we were married, we went to New Mexico. I've told this story before, but she had access to a debit card that was linked to an account that had her father's life insurance money that had been deposited in there after he passed away. But a huge amount of money that nobody would notice if we did like a Thelma and Louise road trip and we were just like, let's go, and who knows where we're going. That's what we did. So we had this debit card that she was supposed to use for emergencies. And the emergency was we wanted to see the Grand Canyon. And so we saw the Grand Canyon. We saw Carlsbad Caverns. We went to all sorts of fun places out that way. And I kind of get a lot of those places like Meteor Crater. I go, is it Arizona or New Mexico? I forget, But we went to lots of places in New Mexico. In fact, that trip ended when the debit card stopped working. It got turned off. And so we had to kind of go home with our tail between our legs. And we were in Albuquerque. And again, we were kids. This is a funny story. We're in Albuquerque. And we saw like a parade. It was like a parade of lowriders, and I love lowriders. I always wanted a lowrider, and it was trucks and old cars and stuff. And so we pulled over on the side of the road. And these lowriders are driving around the block, and we're waving at them, and it's so cool. And then as we're parked there, like I don't know if we're really in a parking spot or not, a police officer pulls up next to us, and I was like, oh man, we're gonna get a ticket for sitting here. And he goes, what are y'all doing? And I said, well, we're watching the parade. He goes, this is not a parade; those are gang members. Because you need to get out of this part of town. What are you doing? We're like, oh, we don't know. So we did move, and we found this Mexican restaurant called Little Anita's. And Little Anita's is if you've been to Albuquerque, there's a few locations around. And my Little Anita story is that they asked us if we wanted what kind of salsa we wanted, if we wanted mild or hot or really hot or something. I said, I like it hot. My wife does not like hot sauce. And so I got this pretty hot sauce, and I wanted to test it before I put it all over my food. And so I put my fork in it. And I put the fork on my tongue, and in my mind, I had 4 welts that immediately came up, like where the 4 ends of my fork were, that had burned my tongue. And I drank my water, and I wasn't really paying attention. When I looked across the table, my wife had picked it up and dumped the entire cup of it on her taco. And so as I tell the story, I was getting ready to stop her, and then I went, I'm going to watch this. And I waited for her to take a bite. She drank all of her water. She drank all of my water. If this were a Three Stooges bit, she would have dumped the flowers out of a vase and drank that water. It was super hot. But several years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago, Susan and I went to Vegas for an AI conference. And we realized that it was like an anniversary, like 30 years since we had been on, not 30 years, but 20 years or 25 years since we'd been on that trip. And we went to the same Little Anita's restaurant, and we told that story to a waiter. And then the waiter looked at us and he goes, I wasn't alive then. So that's always a nice gut punch right there. We went to Meow Wolf, which is in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We took the kids to Meow Wolf. And when we went through there, I met some of my friends from Digital Press. One of them was a man named Paul. And he had baked us a loaf of bread, jalapeno bread. It was so good. And it was such a nice gesture to just meet a stranger, somebody that you just knew online. And be able to meet him. In fact, we went to the History Museum with him and his son and his daughter. We had a great time. Here's the last thing I'll tell you about New Mexico. On that first trip, we had a lot of things that we wanted to go to. I wanted to go to Roswell and go to the UFO Museum. I didn't get to go that time. I have been since then. But this was in 93, let's say, 93, 94. And I had heard about Area 51 and Groom Lake. Now, most people didn't know what Groom Lake was at that time. I would say most people knew what Area 51 was, but it wasn't as popular in pop culture as it is now. and I wanted to go see it. And so we had got these instructions somewhere about where to go, and we got to a road, and then we turned on an exit, and then there's the sign, and the sign says no trespassing, do not go forward, and then it said something like lethal force is approved or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's bad. And so we took pictures in front of the sign, and as we were taking pictures, we looked, and there was a Jeep or a truck coming down a dirt road towards us. And I said, it's time to go. So we got out of Dodge. I don't know. I'm sure they were coming to ask us what we were doing and help us on our way. And we helped ourselves on our way. we just kept going. So that was, but that's all things that happen in New Mexico. Lots of good memories and even recent memories going there. Oh my gosh. You know what? Sorry. I was on a road trip. Gosh, I don't remember. Maybe it's 10 years ago, something like that. But it was right around the last season of Breaking Bad. And I found out that Breaking Bad was filmed in and around Albuquerque. And so I went online and I got a list of all the filming locations from Breaking Bad. And I drove around by myself and took pictures of me in front of Walter White's house and at the chicken restaurant and the car wash and all the places that are in Breaking Bad. And so, yeah, that's one other fun memory I have of that area. Oh my gosh, this is going to be another long episode. New York, so I would tell you two quick things. Number one, my buddy Sean, who I used to do throwback reviews with. Sean is from Buffalo, or not from Buffalo, but in and around the Buffalo area. And so we went on vacation to Niagara Falls, and I got to meet Sean. I've driven up there a second time to go hang out with him. And Sean is like, like what they say, like a brother from another mother, right? Like we have so much in common. We've had so many shared experiences. And I talk to Sean almost every day. So, he's just a really, really, it's like one of your best friends that just happens to live, a couple thousand miles away. But I would say that, if I have one sharp memory of New York City, it has to do with work, but not really at work. I went to New York City for the first time for work, and I found out that Grandmaster Rat, well, I knew this, that Grandmaster Rat, Kevin, one of the founders of the Cult of the Dead Cow, lived there. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, and I didn't know him. I talked to them a little bit online, and I'd seen him in the BBS documentary, and of course I'd followed the CDC and all these things. But I reached out and I said, hey, I'm going to be in New York City. And he said, oh, what hotel are you at? I'll stop. I'll come get you, and we'll go on a tour. And so he came to my hotel after work. Like I was in New York City, like a work week. So travel on Monday. I was there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then left on Friday. On Tuesday, I think one night was just him. One night was him and his girlfriend. Maybe two nights was just him. But he showed up at my hotel and he said, we're going to walk the lower third of New York City. And we walked all in. And I'm geographically challenged when it comes to New York City. But over the 3-day span, we went to Central Park. We went to Times Square. We went to Chinatown. We rode the ferry by the Statue of Liberty all 3 nights. We went to Wall Street. Like I had never been to New York. And this guy who didn't know me from Adam walked me all over New York City. And it is a trip. It was a tour I'll never forget. It was a trip I'll never forget. And it's one of those things where a stranger just gave you their time, and it was so appreciated, and it's like I'll appreciate that forever. I'll remember that forever. So that and that's the only time I've been to New York City proper. Like I said, I've been to Buffalo a few times, but I've been to Rochester a couple times, but this was the only time that I've actually been to New York City. So that's what I'll always associate with that. North Carolina. I've been to North Carolina. It's been a while. But I'll tell you, the first time I went to North Carolina was in 2003. I went to Charlotte, North Carolina. And the reason I went there is because I went to a security training class that was at the Microsoft campus. So it was an actual Microsoft campus. We went in. It was a Microsoft training course for securing servers. And I just have a lot of fun memories of that week. I remember the Xbox was relatively new, and they had a Microsoft store, and the guy, our contact, said he could use his employee discount. So we bought Xbox games using his employee discount. We ate lunch every day at the cafeteria, and they gave us something like play money, like Monopoly money, that was like Microsoft bucks. And they gave us like $13 a day or something. And I remember I went to the cafeteria, and I was like, I'm going to get a sandwich and a banana and a drink and, a bag of chips and a cookie or whatever. And she went to ring me up. She's like, okay, it's like $3. And I was like, what? And everything was so insanely cheap because, they don't want their people to leave. They don't want people to leave the campus. It's kind of like Amazon and Google and places like that today, right? This is back in the early 2000s. And so I was just like, well, how much is this? Like I put a Kit Kat on there, and how about another drink? And tried to use my $15 or whatever they'd given me, the whole week I was there, I was like, God, I want to work for Microsoft. I think this is such a cool place. I just loved it. And I walked around, and one of the people that was teaching the class gave me this tour. And as you walk down the hallways of where we were, there were imagine like glass doors that are in a convenience store, but not ones that pull open, but like that slide open. Refrigerated, big refrigerators full of free soda. You could just get a free soda. And he was like, here's where you get your free soda. I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Free drinks? And then he goes, here's the lounge area. And there's ping pong tables and billiards tables. I was like, oh, really? I was like, this is great. And then there was this little dark room with kind of what looked like reclining chairs. I was like, what's that? He's like, oh, that's where you go to take a power nap. So you work your 8 hours and you go take a nap, then you go back to work some more. I was like, what? I'm not going to work in a place where I got to take a nap and stay at work just for some free sodas. And I was like, I'm out. The Microsoft dream is over. that ended that. But yeah, North Carolina, fun stuff. North Dakota. I went to North Dakota in 2015. Now, North Dakota, I always imagined would be a whole lot of nothing. And then I got to North Dakota and it's a whole lot of nothing. I mean, you drive for hours and there's just not much to see, But we did find cool stuff to see. We went to go see the Minuteman missile silos, which this is where nuclear missiles were in the ground and ready to launch, right? And there's one that you could see that famously they're supported by like cables and wires because they don't want them to touch the walls. They want the nuclear warhead or whatever to be banging around on the walls, I guess. But one of the wires snapped and the missile was like in there like cockeyed, like it's just like hanging in the wrong angle down in the missile silo, and some dude had to go down there and fix it. I go, that's a job I don't necessarily need, but. Anyway, we also got to see the launch house. And so there's this house like out in the middle of nowhere, and you go there and it looks like a little ranch house, like, 1,500 square foot, 1,200 square foot, something like that. And then you go inside and you kind of walk through and there's a ping pong table and there's a kitchen and there's a living room and then there's an elevator. And you go down the elevator underground, and eventually you get to the underground missile silo. And if you've ever seen War Games, at the very beginning where there's the two guys that are going to launch the missile, they have to turn the key at the same time. It's that room. I mean, not the one for War Games, but it's that same thing. It's, where the two guys sat, and there's the two key things. And if they both turn the key, those nuclear missiles are going to launch. So it's really, really cool to see. It's a fun memory. Here's one other fun memory of North Dakota. We went to the, I'm sure it's Fargo, but we went to the visitor center in North Dakota, and they have pretend props from the movie Fargo. So, and you could take pictures and stuff, but they had a wood chipper. And so my kids, and they had like fake body limbs and stuff. So my kids, we have a lot of pictures of my kids putting arms and legs in the wood chipper. Raise them right. That's what you got to do. Ohio. We went to Ohio. I've been to Ohio a few times, but in 2013, we went on a road trip to. It was on the trip the first time we went to Buffalo, and we made a point of going to Ohio and seeing a few things. One thing we went to was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I always wanted to go there, and it was everything I hoped for. We got to see, things from, there was like guitar, all these guitars. In all eras. That's why I'm kind of stammering, because there's costumes that were worn by Slipknot, and then right next to it in another case there was outfits worn by Ike and Tina Turner. And so just this whole range. There was a lot of rap stuff there, which I was not expecting, but they had Run DMC, they had or DMC's glasses, and they had one of Flavor Flav's clocks, and they had the original drawings of the Public Enemy logo that they turned eventually into the Public Enemy logo, and stuff, handwritten lyrics. But right in the middle of the whole museum is this pedestal, and the pedestal's rotating, and there's lights on it, and on top of the pedestal is Michael Jackson's sparkly glove. It's like it's the the end all, like the center coup de grace of the whole museum. But we had a great time in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Museum. And on that same trip, not far from there, we got to go see the house from A Christmas Story. So if you don't know that story, the outside of the house was shot in this house, which is in Ohio. But the inside, the interior stuff wasn't shot inside the house. It was shot inside a soundstage. But these people bought it, and they redid the entire inside of the house to look exactly like the movie. And so if you go on the tour there, everything that, all the things from the movie, there's props of them in there that you can play with. Like there's a giant crate that says Fragile, and inside that there's a leg lamp, and you can pick it up and pose with it. There's a thing you can crawl underneath the sink where the kids hid. You can go upstairs, and there's was it the Little Orphan Annie, the code dialer thing, so, and there's the bar of soap that Ralph had to put in his mouth whenever he said fudge. So all the stuff from the movie is there, and it's a lot of fun. It's really a lot of fun to go to and see all that stuff. Man, that brings us to Oklahoma, and I could tell you 100 million things about Oklahoma. The whole podcast, it seems like, is about Oklahoma, but I will tell you very briefly. I was born here in Oklahoma in 1973, and except for the 18 months that my wife and I lived in Spokane, Washington, I've spent my entire life living in Oklahoma. I've moved a couple hours to the east and to the west, but I currently live less than 10 miles from the house I grew up in. So, I live right near Route 66. So Route 66 is actually Main Street in my town. So I grew up knowing about Route 66 and knowing about, Oklahoma and Oklahoma City and stuff. So, again, I've been to all 50 states, and I've met people from all 50 states, but there's something that keeps me here. There's something about the people here and just the way of life. It's not too slow, but it's not too fast. And I'm, if I have my druthers, I'm sure I'll probably die here, I may go someday. Who knows? Well, I'm not that way, but I may move somewhere someday. But it's not in the immediate plans, So I can do a whole podcast about just Oklahoma if you'd like, but I'll keep that one short. Oregon, I went to Oregon on a road trip. Here's a funny memory. I remember seeing the signs for the Oregon Trail, and I thought that's so funny because to me, the Oregon Trail is, just a video game, right? Like it's not an actual place that you would go to, you know what I mean? But seeing the signs for Oregon Trail. And by the way, we ate at a restaurant right by that sign, and my wife, we were on a road trip, and my wife left her debit card behind. And we made it across the street and then went back. We were like, oh my God, because we went across the street to buy ice cream from Dairy Queen. And then we were like, oh, we don't have our debit card. And we went back, and in the 2 minutes that we were gone, the waitress had found the debit card and called our bank and had the card canceled and said it was lost. So, but didn't tell us. So then we got the card and continued on the road trip. And the next time we used it, we're informed that the card had been reported stolen. So that's always fun to deal with on a road trip. But by the way, I've never been to Portland. I've been to different parts of Oregon, But I've never been to Portland, which is, I didn't live that far away from it when I was up in Spokane. So I would like to go see Portland. I think Portland is probably a lot like Denver in that what's portrayed in the media and what we see online is probably different from actually being in Portland, So I would like to go see and experience that town for myself. Pennsylvania. I went to Pennsylvania on a work road trip. We went on a trip one time to Washington, D.C. We took the kids. I think this is probably like 2015, 2017, somewhere around there. And we found out that in Pennsylvania is the Stoogeum, which is the official Three Stooges museum. And I grew up on the Three Stooges. I raised my kids on the Three Stooges. I have family members who love the Three Stooges. About 2 or 3 years ago, I went back and watched all 190 or 191 shorts. It took me a couple of months, but I'm been a lifelong fan of the Three Stooges. So we went to the Stoogeum, me and the kids. I was disappointed not in the museum, but I was disappointed that it said no photography. And so you weren't allowed to take any pictures. And when I got home, I looked online and there are pictures of every inch of that museum. So I think I'm the only person that didn't take pictures. So I have to look at other people's pictures. But lots of original memorabilia. And they had a Three Stooges, either a pinball machine or an arcade game. I don't remember. But, it was a fun memory. And the kids really enjoyed that too. Rhode Island. I've been to Rhode Island. Rhode Island is not large. Rhode Island is a state I would like to revisit and go do some things. But I will tell you a funny story about Rhode Island. When I was there, I always make a point of eating at local establishments. I always do that. Not necessarily when I'm at. I do it a lot at home, but I always do it on the road. I never want to go to McDonald's. I never want to do. That's not true. I will do McDonald's breakfast. Because usually I'm hitting the road and I will get my breakfast burrito and I will get a large coffee. And now I'm hooked on the way my wife drinks them with 3 cream and 3 Splendid. But for lunch, for dinner, I always want to eat at a local place, not a chain place. I always want to eat someplace that I've never eaten at. And when I was in Rhode Island, I found a burger place. And I was I went there and the burger was amazing. It was just so fresh. And they gave me this huge amount of French fries. And they the French fries, they gave me so many French fries, they were in their own bag. And I remember I wrote down the name of this place because I was going to tell my wife. And the name of this place was Five Guys. And then several years later, we had a Five Guys, and there are Five Guys all over the place. So Five Guys is a very popular burger chain, but it was relatively new at the time when I was there, so I hadn't heard of it, and I thought that they were local to Rhode Island, but it turns out they were not. So when I was in Rhode Island, I went to the very local burger place, Five Guys, and had a very delicious lunch. South Carolina, I've been to South Carolina a few times. I've been to Charleston. I've been to South Carolina for work, so I've eaten it at different places. But I will tell you, this is a funny story, which is not really South Carolina, but it is. Earlier this year, my wife and I did our anniversary trip in our cruise. We flew over to London, we went to Paris, we went to Barcelona, to Spain, and then we took a cruise in Portugal. We did that whole trip, right? But on the beginning of that trip, our big layover was in Charleston, South Carolina. And the layover was 3 hours. And I told my wife, I was like, is that long enough? Can we get an Uber and go somewhere, do something? But I was told it is not. But because we had bought business class tickets to go overseas, we got access to the VIP lounge in the Charleston airport. Now, I've never been in a VIP lounge. And when we went in there, I cannot explain to you how large it was. It was the size of, I don't even know. Imagine what you think of as I can't even tell you. An auditorium, and then it was 5 of those. I mean, it just seemed like it just went on forever. We went into a room, and there were 30 seats, and they were all private kind of seats, right? Imagine a seat where it wraps around you a little bit so you can kind of sit there and have a little table to work and not necessarily see the person next to you, but a whole thing. But then there was a whole next room where you could go and eat. And then there was another room where you could go do stuff. And there were like men's and women's restrooms. I would say there was like 8 sets of them in different places. Like it was that big. It was, I couldn't believe it was inside an airport. And that, like when you're outside, like I never noticed it. It was just like a tiny set of doors and you go in there and open to like this giant amphitheater, size place. But so anyway, I had a great time. Just happened to be in the airport that time. I have been outside the airport, of course, but anyway, that's a funny memory. I've been to South Dakota. In 2000, I wrote down, 2012, I think is when we went through. Of course, we've seen Mount Rushmore and all those kinds of things. I will tell you, a special memory for me about South Dakota is when you're driving on road trips, and I've driven on many, many, many road trips. The excitement is always towards the destination, and when the destination's over, it's time to go home, and nobody wants to stop for anything, right? So if you're going somewhere and there's something to see and the detour is 20 miles away, no big deal. Let's go out of our way. Let's go there, right? But on the way home, if something is 20 miles out of the way, it's nearly impossible to get anybody to go. So we were on our way home from Mount Rushmore, and I saw something and it said it's like 20 miles away. And I told my wife, I said, we got to go. Nobody wanted to go. My kids did not want to go. My wife did not want to go. And that's not fair because my wife is always supportive and stuff. But it was an ask, right? And so what that was Devil's Tower. Now, if you're not familiar with Devil's Tower, that is the tower that appears in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That is the big tower that's at the end of the movie that the UFOs are on top of. And so we went to Devil's Tower, and you could drive a little ways up a road, and then you have to pay money to get further. And I guess there's like rock climbing, and there's some other stuff, and everybody was tired, and nobody wanted to do any of that. But we did stop at the nearby rest area, and we took a bunch of selfies with Devil's Tower in the background. And that was good enough for me. Just to go there and see it in person was such a thrill. So I will, like I said, Mount Rushmore is super impressive, right? But if I think of South Dakota, I usually think of that trip where we saw Devil's Tower. Tennessee, man, I got so much to say about Tennessee. By the way, I just did an episode of Big Rob's Van, and the headline or the headline, I guess, of the video is the one state I would not go to in my van. And it's really, really, really unfortunate because right now I'm on furlough and I could go anywhere in the country. And I was considering driving to Memphis. It's about 8 hours east of me. And I was going to go visit Memphis. And Tennessee has passed several laws against they're targeting homeless people, but it affects people that do van life. So in Tennessee, they've passed a law that says it is against the law to sleep in your vehicle for more than 3 hours. And that includes rest stops. So you can't go to a rest stop and like stay overnight. That would be my whole thing, would be to take the van out there and drive around and go hang out on Beale Street and go see some of the things that I've seen before. But yeah, they so you can't sleep in your car, and they've passed some other laws about they've made it illegal. It's now a felony in Tennessee to camp. It says urban camping is a felony if you do it on state or public property. And urban camping is defined as sleeping in a place that's not designated as a camping area. So that's exactly what I do in my van. If I park on the street and I sleep in my van, that falls under the category of urban camping. So I don't, not at this point in my life, not another one. Geez. So, not sorry to go off on a tangent, but I'm really disappointed right now in some of the things that Tennessee is doing. But my earliest memory of Tennessee is my family and I went there for the World's Fair, which was in Knoxville, Tennessee in 1982. I have a million pictures of going there. I remember a lot of that trip. It was one of the biggest family vacations that we all, like me, my mom, dad, everybody, that all of us took together, other than going to Chicago. So it's always a special memory when I think about that. I've gone back there as an adult. We went to Memphis when my wife was pregnant with my son, and we toured the Gibson Guitar Factory where they make Les Pauls. That was a super, super, super cool tour. We also, while we were there, we went to the Rock and Roll Museum, which is in the same building. We did all kinds of stuff, and we went to the Civil Rights Museum, which is in the Lorraine Hotel. That's the hotel where Martin Luther King was assassinated, and it's very heavy material, right? This is a true story. We were on the tour, and we were in a group of about 10 people, and my wife and I were the only 2 white people in the group. And that doesn't bother me, right? Because, well, first of all, it just doesn't bother me because it doesn't matter to me what they think, But also, it's like we're there to learn the history. We're there, like, we're not the bad guys, right? Like, we're there with good intentions, And so there was part of the tour where they were talking about people trying to vote during that time. And so there was a big wheel that you could spin. And so they said, well, who voted last year? And a lot of people raised their hands, and they said, okay, well, now you're going to vote in the 1960s, and you got to come spin this wheel. And so one guy went up there, and they spun the wheel, and it says, nope, you were hit with water from fire hoses, and you were not able to vote. And then they said, anybody else want to vote? And a lady said she would vote, and she went up there and spun, and it said, nope, you didn't get to vote because police had dogs, and the dogs were attacking people, and you didn't get to go. And then they said, anybody else voted? And I raised my hand, and she goes, oh, you're white. You get to vote. And I was so taken back. I was like it just hit me, So yeah, I'll say this, and I'll get off my soapbox, but the Civil Rights Museum is this whole place where you get to see what happens when a country is so divided. And I heard a term not too long ago. I always heard that, history repeats itself, but I heard somebody recently say that history rhymes. So it's not exactly the same as it used to be, but it rhymes. And I feel like history rhymes, So it's not a bad idea to go there and kind of reset and take a look at things, because it'll change you. It'll change me. Anyway, lots of memories of going there. Of course, we've been to Graceland. We went there with my kids. We went there with my wife. We've been to Beale Street. And one time we were there. My wife always finds strange things, and she says, hey, you want to go to an alpaca farm? I said, not really, but we did. And we got to go hang out for several hours with alpacas that were, these are alpacas that were retired from walking the Appalachian Trail. So they walk the Appalachian Trail for a while, and then they get retired, and they go to these retirement farms. And you go out there and you feed them. And alpaca, I think, if you do the wrong thing around them, that they could be dangerous, like they could bite you or kick you or something. But for the most part, they were just like big lovable dogs. Like they just walk around. I literally, I have selfies of me and my head on an alpaca, like touching alpacas. Like they're pretty docile animals. So yeah, lots of memories of Tennessee. Texas, or as we like to call it in Oklahoma, Texas. Just kidding. I love Texas. I grew up. Texas was like, I thought Oklahoma City was big city, right? And then when I was a kid, the first time I went to Dallas, I was like, oh, this is way bigger than what I'm used to. There's lots of things between. So Dallas is, I used to say it's a 4-hour drive for me, but speed limits have gone up and cars get better mileage. So now it's like 3.5 hours. So if I go straight south, I will hit what they call DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth area. So it goes down and it kind of splits into a triangle. I-35 splits, so it's I-35 southeast and I-35 southwest. So you could go to Dallas or Fort Worth, and in between those two is Arlington. That's where Arlington is kind of like a little travel place. Like there's a Six Flags there. There's a Ripley's Believe It or Not museum there. We've been to all those things. I bought my car, my Ford Flex that I have right now, I bought in Arlington. I was looking for a black on black Ford Flex. I wanted black inside, black outside, and looked online, and that's where I found one. So I bought my car in Arlington, Texas. On the way down to Dallas, there are several cities that you hit before there. One is Denton is like 20 miles. Before I get to Denton, let me tell you this. On the border is WinStar, and there's a sign, and WinStar says the world's largest casino. Now, I don't think they have the most machines of any casino, and they have a lot of machines. But square footage-wise, it is the world's largest casino. You can walk in there for days and go there. And my wife and I were on a road trip one time, and we went to stopped at WinStar, and I won. I mean, a couple $100 or something like that. And then it wasn't too much later that they sent me a postcard in the mail that said, please come back and we'll give you a free food voucher and we'll give you a free hotel night stay. I said, are you kidding me? I said, I'm on my way to Texas right now. And so my wife and I did that. We drove. Oh, and we got, they have like, I think 7 swimming pools outside. Like it's all like different resorts and swimming areas. So we went down there for free. We drove down there and, we swam for free, and we stayed in the hotel for free, and we had dinner for free, and then I gave them $500 in slot machines. So that part was not free, but all the other stuff was free. But if you go past WinStar, you'll hit Denton, and Denton is, we always call it the girls' college town. There's a women's college there, and Denton is the coolest college town. There's all kinds of stuff there. There's cool thrift stores. There's cool bookstores. There's a Lego store. There's an arcade. There's all kinds of cool stuff in Denton. And then there's Gainesville. And Gainesville is, there's a huge outlet mall. I used to always stop in Gainesville because they had a toy outlet thing that I think was toy outlet for like Toys R Us and KB Toys. So, like when Star Wars, like Attack of the Clones, like that era, like 2002, like that kind of era. I stopped by there, and you could get action figures there for like they were like $6 at Walmart or $6.50 or whatever, and there they were like 4 for $10 or something. So I've just come home with like huge boxes of Star Wars figures that now aren't even worth that. What a great investment. We've been to Galveston, which is down there. We've gone to Galveston. That's where cruise ships come into. We've gone to San Antonio. Pee Wee's Herman's bike is not in the basement of the Alamo. I asked, but I'll leave you with this. We took a family road trip to Austin, and Austin, the slogan of Austin is "Keep Austin Weird." There's all kinds of stuff to see and do. We went to the Museum of the Weird, where we saw all kinds of stuff. I could do a whole podcast about Museum of the Weird. Super cool stuff. Here's the story. Here's one story that I'll tell you about Museum of the Weird. You go into the museum, you pay X amount of dollars, like $5 a person. It's real cheap. And then you go in and there's not a whole lot to see. And then they go, hey, by the way, we're having, like a, what do you call it? Like a freak kind of show, where a guy's going to like nail a nail into his head. He's going to staple, he's going to do all this stuff but it's another $5. So they keep like getting you more and more money, to keep going on in the museum. So, and we did the whole thing. And so we went back, and my daughter, my daughter's like 6, 7, maybe 7 at that point. And we go back, and a guy is going to do all these different feats of strength and all this stuff. He's on a stage, and there's 12 people in the audience, and it's real dark. And so the guy says he's going to do this trick where, if you've seen it, it's called Blockhead. It's a famous like sideshow kind of performance where a guy takes a nail, like a 6-inch pitty nail, like a long nail, and hammers it into his nostril. And it is a thing that can be done. You have to tilt your head a certain way, and you hammer this nail up into your sinus cavity. It's pretty dangerous. And then as he was doing that, he said, when I'm done, I'm going to ask for a volunteer of the audience to come pull the nail out of my nose to prove that it's a real nail. I mean, and I know how it works. Like, I know it's a real nail. But he says that, and I turn to my wife and I go, who on earth is going to volunteer to do that? And I turn back around, and my 7-year-old daughter is on the stage, and the guy is nervous, and he's like, listen, you got to pull it straight. Don't mess around with it. You got to pull it straight out on the count of 3. And she did. She pulled the nail out. My daughter is currently in college doing forensic science, and she wants to investigate crime scenes and all that kind of stuff. So this was early start for her, right? Just that whole kind of that vibe. And then at the very end, that guy said, if you had fun at the show, he brought out a staple gun, and he said, if you had fun at the show, there's a tip jar on the edge of the stage, and if you bring $1 up, you can put $1 in the tip jar, and if you bring a 5 up, you can staple it to me with a staple gun. And my daughter turned to me and said, "Can I have $5?" And I was like, "No, you cannot have $5." But anyway, keep Austin weird and keep Austin terrific, because Austin is a fantastic place to visit. What is after Texas? Let's see. Utah. Utah is one that I haven't been to. I mean, I have been to, but I haven't done too much. I literally stayed at a hotel at Salt Lake City overnight one time, and so I walked around a little bit, but I haven't done all the things that I want to do in Utah. So Utah is on my list to get back. If you're from Utah and you know something great that I should see in Utah, let me know, because I am itching for a road trip right now. Vermont. We went to Vermont. We saw some different things. Vermont was one of the places that we stopped. We spent the night on our way up to Maine. I have this funny memory of Vermont, which is unfortunately not about something like associated with Vermont, but we stopped at this gigantic tourist trap. I don't know, like a general store. And we stopped there because there was a sign that said they had maple syrup, and I wanted to get fresh maple syrup from Vermont, which I did. And I also got some hot sauce. It was like Vermont something brand hot sauce, so I got that. But outside, it was one of those stores where there was like all kinds of statues. Like they had the Blues Brothers statues outside and all these things. They had stuff up on the roof, and then when you went inside, there was a million things. So just a fun memory of, like I said, getting that maple syrup fresh from Vermont. That was I like things that you could take away from a place, and it's always bittersweet when you get something, and no pun intended, but when you get something that is edible, because like we used that thing of syrup, and it was great, and then it was gone, and so now you don't have that thing. You just have the memory of how good that, and man, it's good. It's way different than the syrup that you buy from grocery stores. Let's see. That would take us to Virginia. Now, I've been to Virginia mostly because Virginia borders Washington, D.C. I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. My wife has spent more than me, but I'll tell you this. This makes us sound like we are living a different financial class that we are actually in. But my wife rented a condo in Virginia. Alexandria. So the way that came about was she took a job with the FAA, and the job had the understanding that 1 week a month she would be in Washington, D.C. So she would be hoteling from Washington, or working from Washington, D.C., and would be hoteling. But the way that this worked out was basically the job said that it wasn't that she could be in Oklahoma for 3 weeks and then be in DC for 1 week. The job was DC based, and you had to be in the office 1 week, and the other 3 weeks you could be anywhere you wanted, right? So, so it's kind of flipped, right? So she had to have a place of residence to apply for this job, so she got this condo. I went to the condo twice, I think, but a lot of our friends and family used it. Everybody that went to Washington, D.C. during that time, Susan would say, "Hey, you want to stay in a condo for free?" And so a lot of other people stayed in a condo. I had never been in a condo before. I believe it was 600 square feet, and it gave me not as much as it really would be, but it gave me a taste of what it would be like to live in a tiny house full time. Like when you're with another person in 600 square feet, you always know where that other person is. There's never a point in time where you're like, I wonder where they went. You know where they are. They're either in the living room where you can see them, or the kitchen where you can see them, or the bedroom where you can see them. Right. So, yeah, that was a fun experience. And so just to recap, because that job she took was in DC, it was a big pay raise, which is why she did it. But because she was supposed to be based in DC, she had to have this condo. And so that came basically out of her raise money, right? Now that raise paid off later, but to lead to other jobs and stuff, right? So it was a kind of a break even wash kind of thing, but it was fun, and lots of cool. There was an Irish pub right down the street from where the condo was, and when you walk down there, actually there was like lime scooters here. There are lime scooters. I don't remember if that's what brand they were there, but you could rent, like electric scooters and go down there, and there was lots of stuff to see. It's like a little art district. There was a person that was like reading tarot cards and stuff like that. It's real fun, little area, all in Alexandria, Virginia. Washington State. Well, as I mentioned, I lived in Spokane, Washington for 18 months. I started work for the FAA as a contractor, and I was really hoping to get on as a federal employee in Oklahoma City, which is very, very difficult because the way that the hiring process works, they award your interview is or your application is scored based on your qualifications, but veterans get a 5-point preference, and veterans who retired like with disabled veterans, they get 10 points. So you could be the best person for a job, but sometimes you don't make the list on the points, right? So, and there's a high concentration of veterans here in Oklahoma City. And so if you take a job somewhere else, this was our plan, you could take a job somewhere else and then maybe transfer back home later. And so that's what Susan and I did. So we took a job. We both got hired on with the FAA office in Spokane, Washington. And so we lived there for 18 months. I went to Seattle several times while I was there. Went to Pike Place, of course, the first Starbucks. So we've done all that. I went to Mount Rainier, which was near and dear to my heart because in 1947, there was a man named Kenneth Arnold who was flying a plane, and he saw in the sky several silver discs that flew past him. He did not know what they were. They were at a high rate of speed, and the reporter that was interviewing him said that they looked like flying saucers. And so that's where the term flying saucer comes from, is that sighting in 1947 by Kenneth Arnold at Mount Rainier. So when I went to Mount Rainier, it was like, it's like going to the Holy Land for me. So I, I check all these things off, right? Like I've been there, and I've been to Roswell and Area 51, all these things. So, I would say that's most of my memories, of course, would be living in Spokane and in and around that area. What a great time. I ran my magazine. If you listen to the podcast about You Don't Know Flack, where we talked about In Tune magazine, my wife and I, that was all in Spokane. And I have taken my kids to Pike Place. And so here's a story I'll leave you with Seattle. So Oklahoma City, for a long time, did not have a professional sports team. We don't have pro football. We don't have pro hockey. We have like farm teams, right? So we have a hockey team that when guys get good, they get drafted to the NHL or whatever. I don't even think we have a hockey anymore. But everybody really wanted a professional sports team. So college football is huge here, and women's softball, the Softball Hall of Fame is here in Oklahoma City. If you ever see the women's softball tournaments, it's always here in Oklahoma City. So that stuff is big, but no professional teams. And so eventually in 2008, we finally got our own NBA team, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, if you don't know the story, and I'll make this quick, the Oklahoma City Thunder used to be a team called the Seattle Supersonics. So the Seattle Supersonics, or a NBA team for many years. When I was a kid, I loved Seattle Supersonics. There were a lot of players, from there. I think Hardaway was from there, and a lot of guys from Seattle. And they got into a dispute with the owners over getting a new arena in Seattle, and I think things got pretty ugly. And one of the major owners, Clay Bennett, is from Oklahoma City, and so this deal fell through. The city didn't approve the tax, I think, to get a new arena made, and so they moved the team to Oklahoma City and they rebranded them. And so there was a brief time where they were like up at the top of the Thunder where they play. It used to be, it's changed names. It was a Paycom Center. It's been a couple things now, but where they played, like they have retired jerseys from Seattle Supersonics players, and then, like that kind of, I think they're still there, but that kind of stuff is just, at the very beginning, it was a big deal, and then it just got super downplayed. Like nobody, like when they were covering statistics, they were like, well, Oklahoma City Thunder has won this many, they won a playoff previously as the Seattle Supersonics, and we're like, no, we're not the Seattle Supersonics, we're the Oklahoma City Thunder. So people from Oklahoma were very happy to receive this team and support this team. If you follow basketball, you know that last year, for the very first time, the Oklahoma City Thunder won the NBA championships, the NBA champs. We're the champs. We're the best in the world. So kiss our basketball. I don't know. I don't know what to say. But the people of Seattle, not happy with us. And I mean, there's two sides to every story, right? So to us, we were like, hey, we got this team from Seattle. And within 15 minutes, nobody talked about Seattle ever again. We're like, great, Oklahoma City Thunder. But the people in Seattle, pretty bitter that, to them, they think we stole their team. Well, I didn't steal their team. Their team showed up and I went to the games, right? So when we went on our cruise to Alaska, we left from Seattle. And so we drove a lot of these states that I've talked about, we drove up there and saw, like North Dakota, and I was all on part of that trip. And so when you go on a cruise, it's real popular to wear a shirt that represents where you're from, so I would always wear an Oklahoma Sooner t-shirt or something like that. Well, the Thunder had just, it was a couple of years, it'd been a couple of years, but the Thunder was in Oklahoma City. And so my son and I had Thunder shirts on. And we went to Seattle, and I did not put two and two together until we were in Pike Place, and I'm walking around with my son, and people are flipping us off and telling us that we suck. And I was like, I could not disappear fast enough, right? Like I felt so bad because it felt like I'd done it to throw it in their face, and I hadn't. I just really didn't think about it. And what's worse is they were doing it to my kid, so I felt really terrible. And anyway, we got on the cruise ship, and it's funny, it has nothing to do with this, but on the cruise ship, there was a sports bar. This was during playoff times, and that's why we're wearing our Thunder shirts. And on the cruise ship, there was a sports bar. It was like a sushi bar. And that was the only place on the ship that was showing the games. And they were showing the games live. And so I saw that it was a sushi bar. And so I took my kid there. And we went in, and they were like, hey, your kid can't come in here. And I go, why not? And they go, it's a bar. It's 21 and over. And I go, my kid's 7. He's not going to order a shot. Or whatever. So, or whatever, he's 9, 10, whatever. I go, he's not going to drink beer. I go, tell you what, we're going to sit right over here at a table by ourselves with our Thunder shirts on, and we want to watch the Thunder game. And the guy said, all right, on a cruise ship, you can do a lot of stuff if you ask. So, anyway, so we sat there with our Thunder stuff that we had worn earlier that day in Seattle. So, sorry, I apologize to Seattle. We didn't steal your team, but we love it. We appreciate it. And you're welcome to come here anytime, and I'll take you to a Thunder game. How about that? Let's see. So we've covered Seattle and covered Washington. That would take us to West Virginia. Well, I never in my life thought that I would go to West Virginia. To me, West Virginia was the thing that you sing before Mountain Mama, Take Me Home, Country Road. I only knew West Virginia from John Denver, Take Me Home, Country Road, right? But West Virginia, it turns out I met 2 really good friends who lived in West Virginia. One of them is a guy named John Schaller, who goes by Bodakar, and the other one is a man named Aaron Dowdy, who goes by Amigo Aaron. These are the 2 hosts of the Amigos, the Amiga podcast. And so I had met Boat. We just call him Bodakar. We just call him Boat. And I'd met Boat through Digital Press. And he was a retro video game collector. I was a retro video game collector. We talked, and I mean, we weren't great friends, but we knew each other, and we talked. And I had started my podcast, and my podcast, Sprite Castle, and this podcast he listened to. And then at one point, he said, hey, I mean, he didn't tell me this, but he had a friend named Aaron, and they said they were going to start their own podcast. And I did that thing where I was like, listen, I'll help you any way I can, and I don't know if it happened like this, but I felt like maybe I said, hey, I shared, like I was like, here's what I did, here's this, I hope this helps, that sort of thing. And their podcast has gone on to become 10 times, maybe more than that, 20 times, 100 times bigger than my podcast. So they didn't need my help. But over time, there was a running joke that Boat was going to invite everybody out to West Virginia, where he lives, Hurricane, West Virginia. It's spelled like hurricane, but it is pronounced hurricane. And he was going to call it Boat Fest. And this was a running joke for a long time. And eventually Boat Fest manifested into reality. And so all of these people who have formed a community, mostly on the Amigos, through the Amigos podcasts and through their YouTube videos and their live streams, but also mostly through, I would say, their Discord server, which is this isn't a plug, but if you support this show on Patreon, I can send you a link and I could get you added to the Amigos Discord server. But people chat there all the time and friendships are made, and I've made friends with lots and lots and lots of people who listen to the show. Some don't listen to the show. Some are from Hurricane. Some are from Australia. Some are from England. Like, people from all over the world came to this small town in West Virginia, Hurricane, West Virginia. And so the first Boat Fest took place 4 years ago, and I have been all 4 years. The first year, my wife and I drove up there in my Ford Flex, and then we were on the way to D.C. We left there, and then we continued on to Washington, D.C. The second one, my buddy Jeff and I drove there in a rented RV, and we stayed there in an RV. And then the last 2 years, my wife and I have gone and we've driven Big Rob's van, and we've camped along the way and done fun stuff. So I've met so many neat people through, like I said, through Boat Fest and through that community. And I've said this before, but when you think about, if you think about like your childhood friends, like people that you met, in your neighborhood, like there's people that you would have been better friends with better friends than that person or whatever, that maybe lived 5 miles away or 10 miles away in a different town. It's just, those are the people you knew because you lived there, right? When you went to school, like, your school chums, and I have lifelong friends, my buddy Jeff, my buddy Andy, people that I've been friends with for many decades and will be lifelong friends with. But it's like there's other people out there that I just lived in different areas, and the internet brought us all together. That's how I met Aaron and Boat, was through the internet. That's how I met Sean. I consider Sean to be just as close of a friend as all those other guys that I grew up with. He just happens to live in New York, and so, anyway, that's another tangent, and that's why my podcasts are so long, because they're full of tangents. But there's no other thing I can think of when I think about West Virginia than thinking about Boat Fest, except for, I will say this, this last time when I went to Boat Fest, amigo Aaron owns a tiny house, which is on a river. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's an hour away from where Boat Fest was, and I am, and have been for years, infatuated with tiny houses. But I've seen some of them. I've toured some, like at home and garden shows, but I've never stayed a single day in. And well, I have stayed in a tiny house, like for an Airbnb for one day. But I got to spend like 3 or 4 days at a tiny house, and I mean, it was a dream come true, right? So that's the other thing I'll always think about West Virginia, staying in that tiny house. Goodness gracious, that brings us to Wisconsin. I went to we took a family trip one time, and we're always looking for interesting places to stay. And my wife found this place that was called the Pod Up North. I did a podcast a long time ago about Futuro houses. And if you don't know, Futuro houses were these houses that were made in the late 60s that looked like UFOs. So it was literally looks like a UFO. It's a big, round thing with round windows all the way around. and it sits on these legs, and then underneath there are steps that fold down, and you go inside. And they made. It's been a while since I've read up on this, but I believe they made 300 of them, and then of the 300, only 150 came to the U.S., and then of that, I think only 50 are known, and most of them are in bad shape. But this one is a Futuro house that is set up in Wisconsin, and it's since been sold, and it's no longer an Airbnb, so you can't go to this anymore. But we got to go there, and we stayed there a week. We stayed, and it's right on a lake that had paddle boats, and we went into town. We did, I don't remember, I want to say this town was Arbor Vitae or something like that. I don't know, but I remember we went to a restaurant, and there was a giant Paul Bunyan and Blue Ox statue outside, like gigantic ones, you know. So, but yeah, and we went to the only thing I know about Wisconsin, I mean, other than that would be cheese curds. Like everybody's like, oh yeah, you got to have the cheese curds. We went to a restaurant and we ordered cheese curds, and there was a waitress who was a teenager, you know. And I was like, what's in a cheese curd? And she goes, I don't know. I always love stumping the help with a toughie like that. So what's in a cheese curd? Who knows? But I can tell you they're good. We had a lot of them. So anyway, Wisconsin. Went there for a week, stayed in a UFO. Good times. That brings us to, as the song ends, West Virginia, Wisconsin, Wyoming. Wyoming would be the 50th and final state. We've been to Yellowstone before. I will tell you, my life is very lucky and very blessed. I have weird luck. My wife and I on a road trip recently stopped by a Hard Rock Cafe casino, one of the busiest casinos in Tulsa. And as we drove up, and we went by the front door, and a parking spot was available. And the closest, I mean, people are parking a half mile away, and then I drive around and there's a spot, the front spot. I go, I don't know. My life is just that way. Random things happen that are weird and funny and good luck. And so we took the kids to go see Old Faithful. We wanted to go see Old Faithful. And Old Faithful erupts roughly every 90 minutes, but it's not exact. It's give or take. It's once the pressure builds up, Old Faithful, the geyser shoots up, you know. And there's nothing in my mind that's worse than having to take two small children up to go see Old Faithful and having them ask, when's it going to go? And you go, I don't know. I don't know when the last time it went. I don't know when it's going again. And so the four of us walked up to Old Faithful, and as we walked up to the rope to the side, you know, there's like a roped off area. We walked up to the rope, and it started going off. And it went off, and then it was over, and then I went, let's go. So we got there within 5 seconds of when Old Faithful was going to erupt. So, yeah, that was, we did all that. I will tell you one other story about Wyoming. I tell people this story about Wyoming. It's not a nice story. But on one of the trips when I was driving from Oklahoma City to Spokane, I was pushing through to try to get home. I believe it's for the 4th of July. So I was really trying to push home. If you type in on Google Maps the route, I think it says you could do that drive in 32 hours, and I made it in 36. It was not safe to do. I used to do those super long drives. Now I don't do that anymore. I'm too old. I drive for 5 or 6 hours. I go, all right, let's find a place to go. But anyway, so I was trying to find a place to take a cat nap. You know, so my plan was to drive 18 hours, take a 4-hour nap, and drive for another 18 hours. That's what I did. And so somewhere that put me in the middle of Wyoming, and there was a casino. So I pulled into this casino. I was driving a Dodge Neon and slept in the car for 4 hours. I woke up like 4 in the morning, and I was like, okay, time to hit the road. And I was still groggy and sleepy. And so I pull out of the casino, I get on the interstate, and as I'm merging, I see flashing lights behind me. And I'm like, oh, cop wants to go around me. He doesn't want to go around me. He wants to pull me over. And so he pulls me over, and he says, you're going a little fast back there, were you? And I go, I don't think so. Speed limit's 70. On the interstate, I'm doing 70. He goes, well, but the speed limit on the on-ramp is only 45 or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but you got to speed up the merge. That's what on-ramp's for. And he goes, nope. And he wrote me a ticket for like 15 or 20 over. Like, I was like, oh, well, you know how they normally knock it down to 10 over so it won't go on your insurance? Not this guy. Boy, did he have a fish on the hook. He wrote me like a 20 over ticket. Like I was doing 65 and a 45 on a on-ramp while I was merging. And he said, where are you coming from? I go, right there. I go, just slept there at the casino. I'm on my way home. I'm just driving through your state. And he goes, well, be more careful when you're driving through this state, boy, or something like that. Like real condescending, you know. And he says, you might want to pull over and get a cup of coffee and wake up a little bit. And I said, oh, good deal. So 100% true story. I pull up at the next exit, and I want you to imagine this. It's 4 a.m. There's nobody for miles, just me and now a cop who has driven off and left. So I pull off of one of those like 4-way stops, you know, that you come to at the end of an off-ramp, right? And I was going to sit there for a minute, and I had just woken up and I realized I had to pee. And so I'm kind of looking around like, is there anything around? No. I mean, it is dark in all 4 directions. And I got out and I peed in the middle of that intersection. And I said, you know what, Wyoming? That's what you get. That's what you get for that ticket. And I made a vow that day, and I've kept that vow to this day, that anytime I am in Wyoming, I will urinate on that state. Is it a grudge that makes sense? Not particularly. Is it one that will probably get me another ticket someday? Probably. But you know what? That's what they get. It's not dedicated to the people of Wyoming. It's dedicated to that cop. So anyway, it's a tradition that I've probably done 7 or 8 times. And every time I do it, I feel a little better. So there you go. You know, you can't go through all 50 states without talking about our nation's capital, which is Washington, D.C. It's not considered to be one of the 50 states, and it's not in the song 50 Nifty United States, but people definitely think of Washington, D.C. as being a state. And in 7th grade, I got to go to Washington, D.C. We did that thing where you pay, I don't know, I raised money. I raised like $500. I went on a class trip where I got to go spend an entire week in Washington, D.C. I did the whole thing. Washington Monument, Lincoln Memorial, the Library of Congress, the White House. I did all that stuff. And I have a real funny story about that. I just will say, since I got a job with the government, I've been to Washington, D.C. many times. I've probably been 24 times. My wife has been over 300 times. She has a log where she kept track. She's been to Washington, D.C. over 300 times. And people always ask me, what's my favorite thing about Washington, D.C.? Like, do you like you like going to the mall? You like going to the Smithsonian? Smithsonians are fantastic. I love the Smithsonian museums. I've been to all of them, But my favorite thing is the food trucks, which is a ridiculous thing to like. But where the FAA headquarters is, when you come outside, there's an entire circle, and there are usually like 20 or 30 food trucks every day for lunch. We don't have that in Oklahoma. We have food trucks, but there might be one, and it might be somewhere where you have to go. It's not when I walk out of my office, there was never a food truck. So I always look forward to that. And everybody I was with was like, don't you want to go somewhere else? I'm like, no, I want to go to the food trucks. It was so exciting to me and so much fun. But let me tell you this story real quick about my trip to Washington, D.C. in 7th grade. We spent 4 days seeing everything you could imagine in Washington, D.C. Went to the Smithsonian, went to, all the museums, all the places. And on the last day, we got off the tour bus, and we were told we were going to a not a convenience store, but like a general store where we could buy souvenirs. And you could buy a souvenir, and then we were going to finish the day and then go to the airport and then fly home. And we were supposed to leave our luggage and stuff on the bus because that was going to get to the airport for us. So we were going to the general store, and I'm looking around for something to buy my parents for a souvenir. I can't, I'm like, does my mom want a hacky sack? Does my dad want a neon pink shirt? This is Washington, D.C. Like, I can't find anything that my parents would like. But my parents love drinking Coca-Cola. My parents drank a lot of Coke when I was a kid. And so I saw a case of Coke, a 24-pack case of Coke. And I was like, you know what? I was like, my parents are like that. Like it said Washington, D.C. I was like, and I'm in 7th grade. Like my brain's not fully formed, you know. So I buy a case of Coke and I walk out and the bus is gone. And I'm like, where is the bus? And they go, no, the bus is gone for the rest of the day. We're walking around. The bus is going to meet us at the airport with our luggage. I'm like, huh. So my friend, you know, who bought the hacky sack, and another friend who bought a baseball hat that says Washington, D.C. And now I'm walking carrying a case of Coke, like 24 cans of Coke. And then they said, now we're going to the White House. So we had to I went to the White House, and you have to go through a metal detector, and they had to run a case of Coke through the metal detector. So they scanned my case of Coke. Like I toured, like they're like, there's the Oval Office, and I'm walking around the White House with a case of Coke. We left there. We went to the Library of Congress. They were like, we're going up to the 3rd floor, or wherever it was. But I remember climbing flights of stairs carrying a case of Coke. Like I carried this stupid case of Coke all over Washington, D.C. And when, you know, I mean, by the end of the day, like the case is all beat up and scuffed up. I mean, but I'm still carrying it. Then we get to the airport. I have to run it through the TSA, the checker. They have to x-ray this case of Coke because I'm taking it carry on, you know, because my luggage is already somewhere. And we get on the plane, and then the stewardess or the flight attendant says, you're going to have to store your case of Coke under the seat in front of you. I'm like, okay. And I put it under there. And during takeoff, something happened. During takeoff, the cardboard must have weakened throughout the day of carrying it around all day. And the side split open, and cans of Coke start running down the aisle. Like they're going everywhere. And you're not supposed to get up, you know, during a takeoff, you know. And everybody's like, free Cokes. And everybody starts grabbing my cans of Cokes. They're drinking them. I'm like, no, it's my souvenir. And I got some of them back. And in this box, now it's all beat up. And I'm like holding it, you know. And we get off, you know, back then you could meet people at the exit gate, you know. And I get off this plane. My parents are there. And I'm like almost in tears. I'm like, I'll buy you a case of Coke, but there's only 17 left. And to this day, my dad saved one of those cans of Coke, and he put it on his counter or on the it was like an entertainment center in the living room, and he has it there. It's still there to this day, and it says Washington, D.C. on the side of it. So at least one of the cans survived. Since that was that would have been 1985 that I went on that trip, and we still have the can of Coke today as a sign from my trip to Washington, D.C. Not one of the 50 states, but definitely needs to be included. Man, oh man. That wraps up another episode of You Don't Know Flag. If you have feedback about this or any episode of the show, you can email me directly at robohara@robohara.com. You can join the conversation on Facebook over at facebook.com/Robcast. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky under the username Commodore. You can come chat with me on the Amigos Retro Gaming Discord server that I told you about before, or you can leave me a voicemail message on the podcast hotline. That is 405-486-YDKF. You Don't Know Flag is made possible by Patreon supporters, people like Patrick Markey, C-Dubs, Jake Nonamaker, and Travis. If you would like to support my podcast and other creative endeavors, visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/Rob O'Hara. All of my patrons get access to the Amigos Retro Gaming server and other additional perks. To find out more, visit my page again. That is patreon.com/Rob O'Hara. For show notes and more information on my other podcasts, visit podcast.robohara.com. Congratulations. If you made it this far, you now know a little bit more about me and the 50 Nifty United States. I'll see you here next time.